It was a whirlwind morning into early afternoon for those trying to keep up with just what was happening in D.C. today. First came reports that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein was resigning after that New York Times story claiming he once discussed helping to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove Trump from office and proposed wearing a wire to record the president, a story Rosenstein later denied. But then others started reporting he was on his way to the White House, anticipating being fired, a fair assumption just a few days after this statement from the president about the Justice Department.
There's a lingering stench, and we're going to get rid of that, too.
Ultimately, Rosenstein arrived at the White House, reportedly met with Chief of Staff John Kelly, then went to another previously scheduled meeting, indicating that all was business as usual. And so we all waited until Press Secretary Sarah Sanders finally announced that the president and Rosenstein have scheduled a meeting for Thursday, the same day Supreme Court nominee Brett Kavanaugh and his accuser, Blasey Ford, are currently scheduled to testify, which, as of this taping, is still on. Certainly interesting timing, especially now that at least one other woman has come forward to The New Yorker, and this does get a little bit graphic. According to Deborah Ramirez at a drunken gathering at Yale, Kavanaugh exposed his penis and thrust it in her face, forcing her to touch it without consent as she pushed him away. In response, Kavanaugh issued a statement which reads in part, "This alleged event from 35 years ago did not happen. The people who knew me then know that this did not happen and have said so. This is a smear, plain and simple," a sentiment echoed today by the president.
Judge Kavanaugh is an outstanding person, and I am with him all the way. I look forward to a vote, and for people to come out of the woodwork from 36 years ago and 30 years ago and never mention it, all of a sudden it happens. In my opinion, it's totally political. It is totally political.
Hundreds of protesters across the country might disagree, though, from those that gathered outside Senate offices to the ones who crowded into the hallways of Yale today. Then, of course, there were the accusations tossed out over the weekend by Stormy Daniels' lawyer, Michael Avenatti, about teenage gang rape, promising his client will go public within the next 2 days. But with all this coming on the same day as the man once known as America's dad, Bill Cosby's sentencing hearing began for drugging and molesting Andrea Constand more than 14 years ago, it's almost like this was Sexual Assault Day in America. But what will come of all of this? Joining me to discuss are Jennifer Braceras. Jennifer is a senior fellow with the Independent Women's Forum. Good to see you, Jennifer. Ellen Zucker is a partner at Burns and Levinson, who has represented multiple women in sexual misconduct claims. Good to see you, Ellen, as well. There's a clip I'm going to show you right away that's going to air tonight on Fox News. Brett Kavanaugh is actually doing an interview this evening. Please take a look.
Did you guys ever look at each other and say, I'm out, this is enough, just isn't worth it?
I'm not going to let false accusations drive us out of this process, and we're looking for a fair process where I can be heard and defend my integrity, my lifelong record of promoting dignity and equality for women, starting with the women who knew me when I was 14 years old. I'm not going anywhere.
So, Ellen, while he says he won't withdraw, is Kavanaugh cooked? And based on what you know, should he be cooked?
Well, I don't know whether he's cooked. That's going to be up to the senators and then up to the American people to decide.
However,
he should withdraw.
Why?
This isn't a normal process. Or if he's not going to withdraw, what he should be doing is what Dr. Ford has done, which is ask for the FBI to reopen its background investigation, do a legitimate investigation, find out what the actual circumstances are. Because when someone makes an allegation, as Dr. Blasey Ford has done, she clearly is pained by this, and we should figure out what occurred here. This is not a guy who's looking to feed his family with a job. This is someone who wants to be on our Supreme Court. And there's a higher level that is required here of consensus within the country that court is filled with people whom we can trust to make decisions about things like sexual violence.
Okay, let me hold you there. What's your assessment of the current state of affairs? Is he cooked, whether he should be or not?
I don't think that he should withdraw. To withdraw would be, I think, seen as some sort of admission of guilt. So were I advising him as his attorney, I would say, absolutely do not withdraw. You need to go before the American people, and you need to tell your side of the story.
Would you also advise him to agree with what Ellen suggested, that he agree with Professor Ford and say the FBI should get involved, just like they were with
I think he wants a fair
Hill?
process. It's not up to him to dictate the process, nor is it up to Professor Ford. It is the job of the Senate Judiciary Committee to decide the process.
You know, speaking of fair and getting a fair hearing, I have to say I was stunned that, one, that he's doing an interview at all before this, but two, that he's doing an interview on Fox News. What do you make of this with just 3 days to go?
I think that he has been chomping at the bit to say his side of the story, because all the media has heard up until this point has been the allegations and his, paper statement. And he's been dying to let the American people see his reaction.
But do you think his choice of venue makes a statement that may be inappropriate when he's saying, I want to be fair to everybody?
Martha McCallum is very fair. I mean, look,
the interviewer in this case.
Yes,
yeah.
I mean, admittedly, Fox News leans right as CNN leans left and MSNBC leans left. But Martha McCallum is not Sean Hannity. She's very fair. And maybe he has a relationship with her. Who knows what the reason is?
I mean, you're a lawyer that advises people to do interviews or not do interviews. Would you have?
Look, one of the things that is so troubling here, and this is a small point in the larger thing, but it fed right into tonight. Do you remember when she was saying, I cannot do Monday, I want to speak, but later? He sent an email saying, I'm ready for Monday. And there's a pugnacious quality to the way he's approaching this. This is a woman who has made serious allegations, now 2 women making serious allegations.
Both of which he says are false.
That is his view. There are a lot of, the constellation of circumstances here, in my mind, suggests that these are women who deserve to be respected, not called frivolous, not called part of a smear campaign, but listened to, with a process that allows us to understand the constellation of facts around what actually occurred.
But if he says he didn't do it, why can't, and he says it's not true, why can't he say it's a smear campaign? He says, I know myself, I know what I did, I didn't do it.
The one thing that we know is that he may not remember what happened. It's obvious there was a lot of drinking in Georgetown, and there was a lot of drinking at Yale.
Here's what we also know.
So what we know is that a process that allows people to appreciate the constellation of circumstances. That's the way we judge things all the time.
Here's what we also know, and I think this is only fair. No, you've had your turn. You've had your turn.
All deciders had their turn, but go ahead.
Here's what we also know. All 4 of the people that Christine Ford names as being at the party say it didn't happen, and all of the people that Ms. Ramirez names as having been at that party say it didn't happen. So,
isn't that a good reason to get the FBI involved, to get to the bottom of this thing?
I have no problem with getting the FBI.
If I may,
I think it's a delay tactic.
If I may for a second, can I talk about a couple of issues you've raised? You wrote a piece in the Globe the other day. Yeah. The first, I don't know if hashtag counts as a word. The first 2 words, hashtag believe women, and you go on to say essentially, not always. Tell us briefly, what's your point in your piece? I want Ellen to respond to it.
Yes, I think it's very sad that we've come to a point in our society where people think that just because somebody's brave enough to come forward with an allegation, that means they're telling the truth. Even if that is mostly the case, that is not always the case. There are situations in which people lie. Men lie, women lie, cops lie. Just ask all those men who were cleared by the Innocence Project with DNA after they served time in prison.
Wait until Thursday's over till you draw. Is that where you're going?
Absolutely. Anybody who's walking around with a T-shirt that says, I believe Dr. Ford, based on what?
Well, how do you feel about people like Orrin Hatch and Lindsey Graham essentially saying that this is exactly the words, a smear campaign? They haven't heard testimony from anybody either. They've drawn a conclusion.
Well, that's true, but I will tell you that the Republicans have bent over backwards to say this woman deserves to be heard. They have given her lots of opportunities to be heard. Senator Grassley has given her all sorts of forums to be heard. And they were all going to vote for him, and the Republicans are the one that says, okay, that have said, okay, this woman has come forward. we will let her be heard.
By the way, do you disagree with her notion? I mean, people should reserve that. I mean, a lot of Democrats have said, I'm voting no.
But
they
a
haven't
lot of
heard her testimony
a lot
either.
of Democrats have decided to vote no on his nomination
Independent
for a
of this.
number
Okay,
of
fine.
reasons, from his position on executive power to
Roe v. Wade and other
Roe v.
things.
Wade
At least their
and to
interpretation.
his lack of candor in terms of the Republican theft of
But are you
Democratic
not troubled that some people
documents.
have concluded that at least Professor Ford is telling the truth
I
before
think-
they've heard a word from her?
I think that there are people who are inclined to believe her, and I think the circumstances
That's not what
warrant
they've
that
said.
inclination. What is troubling here is this sort of cynical political play in which this guy who wants to be a justice on the Supreme Court is participating. And that is very, very concerning because we've got to set the bar higher here. And we're not doing that. And to say we're going to hear her and then we're voting and it's not going to change our vote no matter what we hear, which
Nobody
is essentially...
said it's not going to
Well,
change
some
our
have.
vote.
Actually, some
and in
have
fact,
said that.
and in fact...
But can I, if I may, I want to read one other thing from the president. I'm sure you'll remember this on Friday. It was a tweet from... President basically controlled himself, I think it's fair to say, until Friday when he exploded. I have no doubt that if the attack on Dr. Ford was as bad as she says, charges would have been immediately filed with local law enforcement authorities by either her or her loving parents. I ask that she... We'll forget what the rest of this... What's your reaction to that? The notion that, you know, this happened years ago, but if it was so horrible, she would have said something.
Look, there are times when people come forward and say things. More often than not, women do not. And they don't because the reaction is now what's playing out on the national stage. And what is so troubling to me about the pivot the Republicans have decided to do over the weekend, that first there was a restraint, oh, we want to hear, and now it's frivolous, it's a smear, etc. They want this guy on the court no matter what.
I understand this issue.
And so what's happening here is exactly what women fear in their real life,
Actually,
which
what
is
they
that
said
they
was
will
a
get
smear
destroyed.
what they said was a smear was the second allegation, that by using the delay to search around for somebody who might say something else negative about Brett Kavanaugh, that they felt that was a smear.
Well, actually, the smear language they were using earlier. But you were on the radio with Marjorie Egan me the other day. You weren't buying this notion. You were pretty much with Donald Trump on this, were you not? That if things no, you were. I don't mean Trump, but if things happened decades ago and they were really horrible, women would do something about it at the time, right? Isn't that where you are?
I understand that there are some people that don't report things that happen.
But you're
I understand that. However, what I hope all women and girls learn from this going forward is to report in real time. And what I would tell all three of my daughters, and I have said so to them repeatedly, if anybody ever says anything inappropriate to you, does anything inappropriate to you, assaults you, attempts to assault you, I will have your back. You come and tell me. And that is the message that we should be giving all of our daughters.
But when women don't
sit on it and write to your senator 30 years later.
But when women don't take the advice that you're giving your daughters, you lean to not believe them. Do you not?
Well, no, not necessarily. I think there's a constellation of evidence. The burden of proof is on her to show that she is credible. And in this particular case, the three people she named, including her female friend, the three people she named as having been at that party all say it didn't happen.
No, they say
now
some of them say they don't remember. And it is entirely likely
her friend said
that
she
they
never
would say they don't
socialized with
remember.
Brett Kavanaugh one way or the other. Never socialized.
We only have
with
45 seconds left. Very quickly, you said the burden of proof is on her.
It is.
I disagree.
Shouldn't the burden of proof be on a guy who wants a lifetime? This is not a criminal trial. Who wants a lifetime appointment where he'll be deciding on issues, including issues relevant to this case? Aren't the American people entitled to him satisfying the burden rather than her?
I guess I'd put it to you this way: do you think the burden of proof should be on you if somebody came out of the woodwork and said, Jim Browdy did this thing to me?
What's going on here?
And
if I was applying for, if I was nominated for the Supreme Court,
should you have to resign from this job?
But
just on the basis of an accusation,
a lifetime
basis
job.
of an accusation where your producers and camera people said that they don't recall anything like that ever happening.
Not for a job like this, but if I was applying for the Supreme Court of the United States, I'd say the burden's on me.
This isn't about that.
You have 15 seconds, that's all I have.
And if the Supreme Court is going to be making decisions about women's bodies, sexual violence,
So that's
and the
what this
like,
is really about.
you want someone on the court who you don't think is a person who abuses women himself.
We got to go. Jennifer, nice to see you.
Nice
Thank
to
you.
see you.
Ellen, good to see you as
Good
well.
to see
Thanks
you.
so much for your time. I appreciate it.